And good day to you. Good night, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the live stream. Lots of chat about Formula One, as ever. Austrian Grand Prix this weekend. Lots to talk about there. I don't know how many eagle-eyed viewers just then saw in the background to our intro the start and a few laps of the 64 Austrian Grand Prix, which was held on that very strange, bumpy airfield circuit on the other side of the valley, really, from where the Red Bull Ring lives today. Only held once there as a World Championship Grand Prix in 64, very bumpy. Most of the top runners fell out, but that is not in any way to detract from the victory for Lorenzo Bandini, his only win for Ferrari, and a Ferrari Grand Prix win. They won the first ever Austrian Grand Prix. Interestingly, not many people remember this. I'd actually forgotten it until I looked it up. 65, the year after that race, is always remembered. Well, one of the things we remember is the epic drive by Jochen Rindt and Maston Gregory to win Le Mans in a relatively outdated Ferrari 250 LM at that. Well, not outdated, just a relatively cumbersome Ferrari 250 LM. And they won that race just driving flat out. And the thing lasted and they won that race. The 65 Austrian Grand Prix was held as a sports car race and was won by Jochen Rindt in that same Ferrari 250 LM. And that's kind of lost to history, isn't it? Amazing to think they won Le Mans and then he just won the Austrian Grand Prix sports car race with it. Anyway, welcome, as I say, welcome to the stream. Looking forward to your questions and comments. As ever, I'm just going to do one quick check, if you will allow me to indulge, just to make sure that it's all happening and the live buttons are all there. Yeah, all seems to be okay. Good. Right. Couple of matters of moment. The first is the passing of, well, yeah, Guy Edwards. For me, one of the unsung heroes of Formula One, of motor racing in so many ways. One, he was a great guy, excuse the pun, a lot of laughs. I used to hang out with him a lot in London and learned a lot from Guy. Always laughing, always smiling, sparkle in his eye, great passion for motor racing, loved talking about motor racing in any dimension, and was the pioneer really of how to procure sponsorship from zero. He started life selling Encyclopedia Britannicas door to finance his Formula Ford racing. So he got his hands dirty from day one. He wanted to be a racing driver. That's all he wanted to be, like many of us, many of you out there probably. And he never gave up. And he was a very intelligent, lovely guy. So his that's he published a book, which to me is the standard work. It was a while ago now. Sponsorship in the World of Motor Racing by Guy Edwards, and he wrote it entirely himself. And not only is it obviously the thread of his life and career in motorsport, but he goes into great detail of every sponsorship deal he ever did and how he procured that sponsorship, how he went about it, the methodology. And to me, it's still a standard work. Yes, of course, times have changed in terms of technology. We email, we don't write letters anymore, more's the pity, and many other things besides. But the methodology of thinking through a plan of how a potential partner can work with a race team or a driver is still 100% there, and it's still 100% clear in this book. And I would counsel anybody today still to go out and get it. I'm sure you can still get copies on eBay. And just a reminder, Guy he started from Formula Ford, worked his way up. He really found his sweet spot in a brilliant category of racing, which existed for a while, late 60s, early 70s, 2-liter sports cars, Chevron and Lola, that's a Lola that he had with Barclays International sponsorship. We've mentioned that before. Williams very remiss in not pointing out Guy Edwards' involvement with Barclays, how he got them into Formula One in the first place. And he won a lot of races with that. And it was very competitive. You know, Brian Redman, Jody Scheckter, Joe Bonnier, really quick drivers. And Guy was right up there with them. He won in Formula 5000. He won in big sports cars. He won all over the world. He was cool. He was debonair. There he is with his wife, Daphne, Irish. And of course, their son, Sean, went on to win Porsche Super Cup with abandon. Very talented driver, very sadly, very sad. I mean, I can't use any other word. Lost his life in Australia on an instructor day when the guy was instructing went off, and just absolutely appalling. And they had to live through that. And Yeah, not a good thing, obviously, but from Guy went through a lot as well. And as you can see from this, he was very much front and center of Niki Lauda's accident at the Nürburgring in 1976 when Niki went off at Adenau and hit the guardrail. The Ferrari's the ball of fire there. The Campari Surtees belongs to Brett Lunger, who's bending over, about to go into the flames. And that's Guy on the left, who's parked his Hesketh, who was right behind the accident, just about to go into the flames as well and to rescue Niki. And there's no doubt at all that Niki owed his life to Brett and to Guy and also to Arturo Mazzario, who also stopped. And Guy had no hesitation going straight in. And although he's got the helmet, he's got the fire resistant overalls, they were nothing really in terms of the heat there, offered very little protection. And he got a Queen's Gallantry Medal for that later on. He did retire pretty soon after that, like Chris Amon. It was just like, what's the point of flogging around in a privately entered Hesketh? That was never going to win Grand Prix. He wanted to win. He was a racer. So then he put his mind to finding sponsors and helping other drivers, which he did. Derek Daly, very good example. And here's an example in the book of his methodology that I was talking about. I mean, how many people have actually done stuff like this on how actually to find sponsors and how to put a package together? So anybody that, as I say, anybody that is thinking about how to raise sponsorship, please read the Guy Edwards book. It is a standard work. And here's his final message, and it's one that I often mention anyway on this channel. Without passion, all of this counts for nothing. And that's what Guy always used to say to me. Peter, ultimately, when you're coming over the line to clinch the deal, it is all about the look in your eye, your passion for what you want. The other side of the desk is going to want to do a deal with somebody who's passionate and is never going to give up. That's what they want. And I couldn't agree with that more. I think and Guy was a shining example of that. And one of the things I loved about Guy, and I say I learned a lot from him, apart from everything I've just mentioned, was his imagination and his interest in history. And a couple of times I'd ring and want me for lunch or whatever, have a coffee. And Vicky, his secretary, would say, "Oh no, he's over in the Somme." And I'd say, "What is he doing in the Somme? By the River Somme?" "Oh, he's looking for artifacts." And he would do that a lot. He'd go over to that area around the Somme and look for World War I artifacts. But the best one of all was after he'd seen the film Papillon, in which Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman play two prisoners who were sent to that terrible prison island off the coast of Brazil, which is a French-owned colony, where it was just a prison, and you could not escape. It was a tiny rock, basically. Terrible conditions there, tropics, the works. One Brazilian Grand Prix in which Guy was racing, he went out 2 weeks early, and he arranged all this with the Brazilian army to fly him by helicopter to Devil's Island, as it was called, and drop him there for 24 hours so he could be there just alone and experience Devil's Island. And I remember him saying, when he did get back, I remember him saying, as he saw the helicopter taking off again, the thought did occur to him, if that helicopter doesn't come back, I ain't leaving this place. I've got a Grand Prix to drive in 2 weeks' time. That was Guy Edwards. And yeah, we miss him. He passed away last week. He wasn't well. He hasn't been well for quite a long time. So it's a blessing. Derek Daly, I'm sure, was one of the last motor racing people to see him, as he would have when he was doing his book launch interviews and presence in Ireland very recently. And just on that subject, Derek's book's already been nominated for 2 awards. So if you haven't seen it, definitely have a look at that one as well. So yeah, the passing of Guy Edwards, very sad. Other news, I was very pleased to see that Christian Lundgaard, the young Danish driver, won his second IndyCar race this year. He's driving for the Arrow McLaren team, which used to be Sam Schmidt's team. Sam, great guy, quick driver, broke his back in an accident in the IRL days, and then kept the team going with Peterson, and then sold the team to McLaren. Anyway, Christian drives for that team, and I've always watched out for Christian's career anyway, not kept in touch with him per se, but always been interested to see how he got on. He for me, he's one of these classic examples, a bit like Fred Vesti, classic example of a driver of enormous talent who deserved a Formula One seat on talent, or at least a proper shot at Formula One. And like many drivers out there, has never really and was never really given real opportunity in Formula One, even though he was winning in Formula Two, even though he showed all the talent on the way up. So he went over to IndyCar, he won for Rahal Letterman, and now he's won 2 for McLaren. And what I what I thought might be a little bit of fun, there he is looking cool today, and that's Christian today. But this is a video I recorded with him. It's only 1 minute, so bear with me. I recorded with him in 2020, 6 years ago, when he had just won his first Formula 2 race with ART. Given all of that, I thought I would catch up with one of the drivers who's excelled this year in Formula 2, given his relative lack of experience and the rapidity of his rise in his career so far. I speak, of course, of Christian Lundgaard, Formula Renault, Formula 3, and now F2, already won an F2 race, and he's usually there or thereabouts in everything that's going on. So let's catch up with Christian at home in Denmark. He's the son of a former European rally champion, and presumably he's really looking forward to Spa. Christian, very good to see you. Let's just talk initially about how quickly your career has gone in an upward path. It seems like only yesterday you're doing Formula Renault, and a lot of your contemporaries from that Formula Renault year, 2-3 years ago, are still in Formula 3. But here you are in Formula 2 with ART, one of the best of all teams.
Well, obviously, so far it's been a quick, let's say, change. Because obviously, a few years ago I was still in karting. Back in 2016 was my last year in karting, and obviously since then every year I've moved up a category. And obviously, if you look at some of the other drivers, they probably do a couple of years in, let's say, Formula 4 or Formula 3. But in terms of that, I'm missing a bit of that experience. But so far, I mean, obviously, with the pace that we are showing so far, I'm not too concerned in the future. But yeah, it's been a quick one, and I'm absolutely, I can't complain at all. I mean, I've got some very nice and good people behind me, trying to help me as much as possible, and bring me as far as I can come.
Christian Lundgaard has just won his second IndyCar race this year. A bit of a lucky win at Road America. Not lucky, but circumstances. The win should have gone to Felix Rosenqvist, who won the Indy 500 this year. Another great driver, talented driver, never to be given an opportunity in Formula One. I keep banging on about that because it irritates me so much. And but the yellows came out just before Felix was about to come in for his last stop, so he had to stay out. And the runners that had just stopped before the yellows came out, obviously then inherited their positions. But Christian is right there. He's very quick, and just like Felix and several others. You know, Bordeaux, Sebastian Bourdais is being quick. I mean, we never really saw the best of him in Formula One, did we? And as I say, Vesti is another good example. But many Formula 2 drivers not given the chance. And if you look at Christian in that interview there, you think, that's IndyCar's gain is Formula One's loss. That guy should have been in Formula One. And he's got a Renault badge on his T-shirt, and obviously Renault were behind him for a while, but nobody really did anything serious with him. Anyway, I won't go on about it. I still think it's a much better system for getting young, talented drivers through to the top in Formula One, not only from countries that we normally associate with motor racing, but around the world, South Africa, India, China. China's got a little bit of a program going now, but India certainly would benefit from it. South Africa, South America, some parts of South America. And that's a system where I think Formula One needs to do it themselves proactively rather than sort of endorsing the teams, because the teams are always going to go ultimately where the money is and go for a relatively easy life, relatively in italics, but they're always going to go where the biggest motorhomes are at the kart meetings, and that's not what we want. We want the talent, and we shouldn't forget Dennis Jenkinson, writing for Motorsport, saying once that somewhere in the middle of Siberia, a guy is chopping down wood, and he's probably going to be doing it for the rest of his life, and he doesn't know that he's got more talent than Juan Manuel Fangio, and he'll never get a chance to prove it. And I think he's right. All these talents out there, but not a lot of them are given the true expression. So, it's another thing that I do try and bang on about quite a lot with F1 and try to show them how we can put forward a proper driver program. But that's another subject, really. I don't want to get too bogged down with that, because obviously this is your show and we've got lots of questions and comments as ever. going into the Austrian Grand Prix. Before we start, I tell you what, you've got to laugh. I don't know if they're doing this as a joke or what, but bear in mind McLaren, uniquely at the front of the grid, started on intermediates in Canada when it was dry, patently. Everybody else was on dries, and we know what happened there. Okay, they still desperate to start on intermediates, because in their preview to the Austrian Grand Prix, and the last time I looked, which was only about 10 minutes ago, the forecast for the Austrian Grand Prix weekend, like most of Europe, is swelteringly hot, sun shining all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. McLaren's press release said, but there's a big chance of rain, and McLaren should be well prepared if it's going to be wet. They're just desperate to do that race on intermediates, I think. Got to laugh. You got to give them credit for trying hard, haven't you? Right, okay. First question from Jim Honts, 7313. If you divided the modern Formula One era into decades, 50 to 60, 60 to 70, etc., can you name your top 3 drivers in each period? And come on, Jim, that's like a 1.5 hour live stream, that one question. I can't answer all that. Yeah, obviously I can, but I don't want to spend an hour and a half answering it, is what I'm trying to say. I say obviously, I'd have a go at it. Just very quickly, if you just take those 2 decades, I know you put etc. in there, 50, 60, you'd have to say Fangio, Moss, Ascari, I would say. I mean, top 3 is a bit difficult. I'm not a great one, as you know, for top 3 or the best 5 or top 10 even, because there are so many guys out there that showed enormous talent, never really got the chance to prove it. But I would, Fangio, Moss, Ascari, I'd be reasonably happy with. 60 to 70. Oof, well, that's all the 60s plus the early 70s, isn't it? Well, sorry, that's the 60s. Yeah, well, obviously Clark, Stewart. And then, how would you differentiate between Graham Hill, John Surtees, Dan Gurney, Jochen Rindt, and so it goes on. You can't really. So, already I'm bogged down. So I can't go any further than that one, Jim. But thanks very much. That's something I need to think about as a live stream on its own, a unique live stream, something we should maybe think about doing. Sarosh, member, thank you very much, Sarosh, for your support of the channel. Peter, has Verstappen also changed his driving style to get the best from his Red Bull, suggesting that Leclerc does what Hamilton is doing with a slightly wider turn in, braking in a straight line for best use of energy? I don't think so. I've just put out a video, I don't know if you've seen it, in which I compare Max with all the top runners, or most of the top runners, going in between turn 1 and turn 2 in Montreal, which is one of the great bits of road. It's that left-hander, and then you've got that very, very small sweet spot in which you can just get the car nicely square if you want to get into an early entry into turn 2 with your braking and your turn-in. And Max there, in a Red Bull that obviously wasn't that good, is still, he's right there on the inside with absolutely beautiful just on that bit of road. If you looked at those pictures, you'd think, how on earth was he slow over the lap? Obviously, there are many other issues with that car, but I don't think he is driving that way. No, I think he's driving absolutely as well. I think at the start of the year, he possibly could have benefited from driving a little bit more, braking in a straight line. But I think now with the changes in the regs, the mods to the regs a little bit, then I think he can get away with what he's doing. We'll have a look again in Austria. Quite difficult to tell in Austria, but I think in Barcelona he was looking, turns 2 to 3, entry to 5, entry to 10. He was looking 12. He was looking just like normal Max to me. Maybe you're looking to see more there than I can, Sarosh, but he doesn't look to be any different from the normal Max for me. Another one from Sarosh. Peter, was Prost as quick as Nigel in his first few years? You were mentioning that he was able to learn from Lauda in '84 and hence backed off and found a sweet spot, especially in the race. Yeah, that's right. That's what did happen. I think Steve Nichols pinpoints it to the '84 French Grand Prix. Well, the days leading up to the '84 French Grand Prix, and Prost saying to Steve, how am I going to beat this guy? And Steve explaining how Nicky approached the weekend, and Prost sort of going through a complete catharsis of how to approach racing. So that was one. The first part, was Prost as quick as Nigel in his first few years? It's a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, Prost won the 78, 79 European Formula 3 Championship with Renault engines, dominated it, and then got into Formula One. I think it's 79. And I then did a proposal on the Guy Edwards lines to Renault to see if I could get those factory Renault engines, which are obviously brilliant, for Nigel Mansell to use in the British Formula 3 Championship. And I did the proposal to Gerard Larousse, who was head of Renault Sport at the time. Great guy, fabulous racing driver. And he he was very interested and said, "Wow, okay, yeah, I trust your judgment on the driver. I'll talk to Renault UK." And Renault UK, I knew them quite well, so I buttered them up. And they said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do it. 1980 Formula 3 season, we will give Nigel factory Renault engine." So I took the deal to March. March said, "Wow, brilliant." And I found a sponsor to help them, but they had free engines, don't forget. And actually, March then took the engines away and did something else with them and didn't run Nigel. Well, they ran Nigel for as long as the money that I'd found was there, and then he was out. And it was very poor, really, how March handled that. But anyway, I'm just saying there's a bit of synergy there between Alan Prost and Nigel Mansell at that stage. I mean, Prost was always in competitive cars, Formula 3 cars. Everything he was driving, he was capable of winning every race he started. Nigel was very rarely in that position, apart from Formula Ford, when he was in a good car, the Hawk DL11. But Formula 3, he was never in a competitive car. So he had to drive differently. And often he was running zero wing because he had no power with a Dolomite engine, good example. So I don't know. I think they're very similar in pace, probably. I mean, Prost was Nigel quick, I think, yes, in those first early years, definitely. I think you're right. It's a good, interesting observation. Another one from Sarosh. Peter, 90 Japan, apart from Senna being irritated that he didn't get the clean side of the start on pole, was also worried that Prost would have finished the race ahead because of his race management. I don't think Ayrton ever thought that Prost had better race management than Ayrton had, and that Ayrton knew how to drive a race, having got the pole. And his philosophy was always get the pole, get the lead to the point where I can back off and win the race. So he never thought, I'm going to drive flat out every race lap, regardless of how much I'm leading by. Monaco, when he crashed, that was lack of concentration. It wasn't actually trying to go really quickly. So no, I don't think that would have. I mean, I wasn't there at that moment specifically, so I can't say exactly what was in his head, but I'd be. I don't think it was anything more than Ayrton being the first guy really to understand the importance of being on the clean side of the grid, and also being very irritated by Jean-Marie Balès, who was a guy that he just couldn't get on with, and they were on different wavelengths from beginning to end. I mean, for me, Balès was actually quite a good FIA president because he was a buffoon. He was a French buffoon in a blue blazer, and he was very easy to read. And I've always maintained in life, everybody's different. And if you want everybody to conform, the world would grind to a halt tomorrow. So everybody's different. You're never going to change people. But what you can do is make allowances or work with people and their characteristics. And Bernie Eccleston's a good example. He's a very, very difficult guy. But if you go into every meeting knowing that he's very difficult and anticipating roughly what he's going to do, then you got half a chance of sitting down and doing a deal with him. As it was with Balès, it was very easy to read Balès. It was very easy to know what would provoke him and what wouldn't, and what he was going to want to push for and what he wasn't. And Ayrton, of course, was not that sort of person or driver. He wasn't interested in any of that stuff. All he wanted was logic and honesty, neither of which he was ever going to get from Balès, I'm afraid. So that's why it always went that way. And when Ayrton wanted to do that, obviously it was a critical race as well. Then it would all piled up as a major issue, and that's we know what happened as a result. But it was just Ayrton being a pure racer, being an honest guy that just wanted to get on and do a logical job. None of which Balès really understood from his point of view. But Ayrton was a more intelligent guy than Balès, I would say. So it's a bit strange that Ayrton didn't really get the best from Balès in the way that, say, Bernie did, for example, over a period of time. So yeah. Ronnie, Hi, Peter. Thanks for your driver style comparison on short corners. For the Austrian circuit, how would you see the driving dynamics for Max Lewis and Hadjar, Charles and the McLaren duo tackling it? Well, I'm not, as you probably gathered, I'm not a massive fan of the new Austrian circuit. I say the new, I mean the old one started in '70, and so it was a while ago now, and it was obviously very dangerous, and it's probably a great job we don't race there. But the new one is, it's basically a square, and yeah, it's lots of technical things like high-speed braking and downhill braking and all that stuff, and the stress it puts on the tires and this and that. But from a driver's point of view, it's fairly line locked. I think, yeah, of course, supple, soft inputs, rhythmic inputs, totally in harmony with the dynamic weights of the car are always going to be an advantage anywhere in the world, even in drag racing, anywhere that's going to be an advantage. But in terms of say, I mean, Arvid Lindblad doing a faster lap than Liam Lawson, I would say Austria is probably the least helpful circuit for that. Because I can't imagine, I mean, Arvid does turn in quite early. He's at least he's at Hajar now. And I can't, Hajar against, I don't know, Piastri. What's Hajar going to do differently? I don't think they're going to do much. I don't think you can gain much by sort of getting in a little bit earlier into one, because it's probably all about bumps and how you use the curbs and everything else. And you've got so many other overriding factors, which is obviously the power harvesting and deployment as well, which will be significant around Austria, I guess. Um, that I'm not getting particularly excited about being able to see much from the drivers. I think we should all go into the Austrian Grand Prix thinking it's a crash bang race on a square circuit with lots of potential for drama and disaster, and probably quite a lot of overtaking and unexpected results. That's how to go into the Austrian Grand Prix. Maybe McLaren are right. Maybe it's going to be a massive downfall in the middle of the race on Sunday, and McLaren, having started on wets, will go through to win. I don't know. It's that sort of weekend, I suppose. Give McLaren credit for that, really. So I think, yeah, in terms of actually seeing a lot, I don't think you'll see a lot. It's very difficult to see the suppleness of a driver like Max alongside a lesser supple driver around Austria. Very difficult in my experience. Anyway, if you guys can see it, let me know. Jim Honts. Hi, Peter. Really enjoying the content. Have Formula One brakes been developed to the point where they're much less of a problem than they were a decade ago? Well, in the sense that quite a lot of it is standardized now. Yes, there are different companies making the friction materials, but in terms of the size and what you can do with that, physically, the architecture, there's nothing, no room at all there. But it's still a competitive area. It's still competitive, obviously, between Carbon Industry and Brembo, and there may well be, other companies in there. Akabono maybe in there. I don't think Hitco are around anymore doing anything, but well, they're not around anymore, but maybe somebody's gone to Hitco secretly and got, I don't know, some mega new caliper from them or something, but I doubt it very much. I think it's Brembo and Carbon Industry. And have they improved? Well, what's improved is the aero around the ducts and the way that air is used for heating the rims, controlling tire temperatures, tire pressures, therefore, and that as an adjunct to that, obviously cooling the brakes as well. And they do that so well now with 3D printing, with CAD, it's an aerodynamic part of the car. That yes, in that sense, if there's a temperature issue, I mean, even Cadillac in the first year, they had obviously had brake problems. Where was it in Canada? I think even before that, didn't they? Miami maybe, but they got on top of it pretty quickly. It's not that difficult, I think, to get on top of cooling problems. In terms of efficiency, they stop on a sixpence still, no doubt about that. The thing that's changed for 26 is that the rear brakes are not playing anything like as big a role as they have done in past years at any time in the history of Formula One, because they're all being used, the rear axle's being used, with engine braking to generate power. Power. So apart from Monaco, which is where you saw the guys that did know how to use the rear brakes go well. So, but yeah, braking less of a problem than it used to be. Hard brake circuits are what? We've had Canada, obviously. Singapore's always quite hard. Monza, maybe. Matthew Waxton. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Peter. Hope all's well. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. Jack's just started his holiday today. I was pleased to see, only because I sort of lived my school days through Jack now, that in England they don't break up till July or something pathetic, you know. And here's Jack on holiday already. Mega. Problem is, like England, it's unbelievably hot in Spain after about 10 o'clock in the morning through to about 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, when there's always a lovely breeze coming off the ocean. And so you just work around that. I mean, I've got AC on at the moment. Hope it's not too distracting in terms of the noise level. I've played around with the mic a little bit this morning, and but we have discovered an unbelievable air-conditioned golf sim area nearby with TrackMaster, you know, Shotmaster, unbelievable sim. So we go there a couple of hours every day now, which is great. So can you speculate how Merc were able to fix their starts? Are they using battery before 50 now, or was it really just tuning? As always, thanks for the great content. No, I can't. I have absolutely no idea. I don't understand why one team would be, what makes a good start and what doesn't. Why Red Bull generally make bad starts with their power unit and why Merc don't. And I think it's fair to say, isn't it? Most of the Merc runners all make pretty good starts, generally speaking. I mean, another question is why Mercedes more unreliable? I've no idea, because they never tell us these days what causes the problem in the first place. So, you know, and if Mark was here now, Mark's he had a bit of flu, as I said. I think I mentioned on the last time. He's okay now, but he's just off on holiday to get away from the hot, sweaty south of England. So he'll be back after this race, and we can put that question to him, see what he think must be going on. But it's all speculation, I think, on how it's going. And I don't think anybody is able to use electric power. They're not able to use electric power. And there was talk about helping cars very slow off the line. I don't think that's been ratified, A, and B, I haven't seen it anyway if it has been. But B, even if it has, secretly, it's only if you make a really bad start. So it wouldn't help you make a great start. Although we, you know, all cynically said, wouldn't it be great if Red Bull had a system where they could just use the electric power to get off the line and be competitive? So there you go. Savage Dougal, how much did the years with Jensen help Lewis Hamilton? In 2011, David said that Hamilton became a lot more smoother after his pairing with Jensen. Yeah, I think that's one area. I mean, Lewis definitely learned from Nico. A lot more to do with how to go approach the weekend and to be more disciplined, probably, with all the gizmos they've got at the factory in the sim, and just pay a bit more attention to any driver aids that he could that might be helpful. Still playing around with this mic. Hang on, there we go. He learned from Nico. And Lewis has always been very good at being self-critical and learning. And yeah, he definitely improved, in my opinion, and certainly it's totally logical that he would have improved a lot in terms of the way he put the power down on the car with Jensen, because Jensen is as good as anybody we've ever seen in Formula One at putting the power down, right up there with Kimi Räikkönen at his peak in recent times, just never overloading, and Sergio Perez, never overloading the loaded rear any more than it needs, just giving it exactly the right amount of load. Just beautiful and incredibly good lack of overlap. Jensen, amazing foot coordination, where he was never wasting speed by just braking over throttle unnecessarily just because he thought he wanted to balance the car, or left foot braking here. Everything was very precise. And when he was on the brakes, he was on the brakes. When he was on the throttle, he was on the throttle. And he was on the throttle beautifully smoothly. So for sure, Lewis would have seen that on the telemetry more than anything else. Yeah, why is Jensen quick here? What's he doing there? What's he doing out of La Source at Spa? You know, and they would have looked at that, and it would have been to Lewis's advantage. He would have learned from that for sure. Zabish says, Mercedes said that the only way not to blow up their battery is not to fight too much. Does that mean that if they have a bad start, their chance of winning the races is slim? I think what they mean by that, I mean, maybe that's out of context, I don't know, but if you show me that quote right now, my interpretation of that is not to fight too much between one another, and not to run unnecessarily closely to the car in front, because temperatures are always important. And maybe the implication is that one of the reasons Kimi had that problem is because his temperatures did go off the clock, the amount of laps he spent behind George and getting George's heat. And maybe it was a battery thing caused by the heat. That's my interpretation of what is theirs, Emish. I don't think it means if they qualify in the front row and they're P10 out of the first corner, they have to sit in P10. No, because when you're passing slower cars, you're not getting into, I mean, obviously if you're stuck behind them for 20 laps, yeah, maybe, but you're more likely to be closely behind another car if it's George Russell, if you're Kimi Antonelli, if it's your teammate. And that's what they're saying, I think. Just if you are racing one another, we can't do it for too long. Or race one another, make sure you're 3 lengths apart, or whatever idiocy they come up with. And I don't mean just Mercedes there. I mean everybody who's got these two guys that are unbelievably quick in both cars and then want them to race without hitting one another or blowing one another's engine up. Jez James, hi Peter. Do you know if there's any footage of Nigel doing a donut in the 11B as he smokes out of the Honda engineers in China? That must have been quite a spectacle. No, we didn't have mobile phones back then. And actually, it was an 11A. It was the 86 car, just to be pedantic. But no, I don't think, well, no, there wasn't. Nobody was, I mean, none of the Honda employees had anything. They were just standing there in their white coats. And there were obviously the Honda officials were there in their suits. And that was it. There was me, John Cadd, and one other mechanic, Gary Woodward, I think. And yeah, Nigel saying, how old is this diff in this car? Why do you want to know that, Nigel? Well, don't worry, just watch. Smoke, and all you can see is a hand in the middle and Nigel doing this and scattering the 2,000 employees to all corners of the earth. It was the first brilliant thing, you know. And you see a lot of the donuts today, it's all set up. They probably all have a donut button on the steering wheel, don't they, in terms of the brake balance and everything else. And they have lots of space too, compared with Nigel. I mean, a donut to me should only be called a donut if the track is, if the car's across the track, you want, I don't know, what, half a meter either end, that's a donut. Spin it on its own thing. You know, that requires a bit of skill. So there we go. Jason Joe Lavitte. And a member, thank you very much, Jason. Very nice to have you. How should Ferrari's Formula One Championship record be viewed? A lot of their success is tainted with preferential treatment. Teams like Mercedes and Red Bull have outdone them recently. Both teams managed to rebuild championship winning teams after losing dominance, while Ferrari has yet to replicate its early 2000 success. Yeah, well, you're right. Now, Ferrari usually have the biggest budget. They've got the best facilities, really, coolest facilities anyway, that's for sure. And if you include Fiorano test track, and yet, you know, very difficult, isn't it? So why is that? Well, I mean, let's take it all in isolation, which you have to because of all these different eras. When Enzo Ferrari was running the team, he was often well, let me think about that. When in Enzo Ferrari's era, he was sometimes massively ahead of the game, like 52, 53, when he knew somehow that the FIA were going to go to Formula 2 regulations for Formula 1 and just happened to have a brilliant Formula 2 car ready to go and basically won every race for 2 years with Alberto Ascari. So that accounted for that. Then, like everybody, they got blown away by Mercedes. And then Mercedes went into the crowd at Le Mans in 55 and pulled out. So then it became Ferrari basically against the rising British teams using their new customer Coventry Climax engines. And Ferrari did really well when it went to a 1.5 litre formula. Well, that's not strictly true. They did win the Drivers' Championship in 58 with Mike Hawthorne. It was a close thing with Van Wall, who won the Constructors' Championship that year with Sterling Moss, Tony Brooks and Stuart Lewis-Evans. But in terms of dominating a championship, it was 61, really, the next time they had a proper go. 50, they also won, I've got to say, they won 56 with Fangio, of course, Drivers' World Championship with Fangio. But yeah, it was okay, but it was very political. And Enzo Ferrari was always at odds with the governing body of the sport in Italy, or not. it was a very political thing. There was the Fiat involvement or not, and there was the way he ran the drivers, pressure on the drivers to produce and deliver at the right moment. Luigi Musso, Eugenio Castellotti, two drivers that lost their lives under massive pressure, which they shouldn't have been under, for different sorts of pressure. Peter Collins, then killed in the 58 German Grand Prix, had a big impact on Enzo Ferrari as well. Saw him as a second son to Dino. But Mike did go on to win that Drivers' Championship. Bit of a hollow win that year. Anyway, 61, he's got Carlo Chiti now doing the 61 Sharknose Ferrari 1.5 litre. And again, perfectly adapting to the new change in regulations to 1.5 litre. And Ferrari dominate that year. But then there's Colin Chapman in 62 producing the Lotus 25 with the monocoque chassis, the reclining driving position, lightweight, very stiff chassis. Jim Clark goes on to win 62, 63, 60, basically dominate that whole formula. It doesn't win every year, but it takes Ferrari quite a long time to adjust what's happening. And Carlo Chiti leaves Ferrari after the success of 61 to go and do the ATS Formula One team. So Mauro Foghieri then comes into the role, which is great. But Mauro, brilliant in some areas, bit scattered in others. But to give him his credit, he did use that stressed engine principle in the back end of 65. But slow to adapt to monocoques, really. So that's why they didn't win any championships then. They won with Surtees, but it was very, very close. And then it was all Cosworth engine British teams for a long, long time. And Ferrari had great engines, good brakes, good gearboxes, but never really had great chassis. And it all came to a massive head in 73 when, in despair, Ferrari said, okay, we'll get John Thompson, the great British monocoque chassis builder, to build our cars for us. And that car was a disaster as well. And then it all changed again. He hired Niki Lauda. He got Luca Montezemolo in, two young guys to come in, and they completely rebooted the team. Niki said the only way to win races and get reliability is testing, 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 testing. I don't do anything but testing between races. And that's what they did. They had Fiorano, and he just did more testing than anybody in the history of the sport. And won the 75 World Championship, 77 World Championship. So that was Niki going in and basically running it Niki's way with Luca backing him all the way. And that's exactly what Michael did with Jean Todt and Ross Brawn. He went to Ferrari, and to the credit of Ferrari, they allowed Michael to do the same thing and bring some of his own people. Niki did that. And so that's what happened. Two great drivers going to Ferrari and creating a different sort of Ferrari. And since then, it's been too political, too much money, too much this, too much that. And yes, we've had Kimi won on the back end of the momentum of the whole Michael Ross Brawn era, but it's been very political. I mean, Fernando Alonso, when he went there, it was a very political time. Shouldn't have been. It should have been Fernando going in and doing exactly what Kimi had done, but it wasn't. There was Felipe Massa there who wasn't slow, and Felipe didn't like the way Fernando was doing things in the team and splitting the garage into two, and it all ended in tears in the end. And we're not that far away from that now, basically. Ferrari, the 79 Jody Scheckter, that was more Michelin championship year. Bernie coming up with a championship formula basically to enable Ferrari to win, which was the championship would be divided into two parts. And each part, you'd only have to count the best 4 races. And on the basis that, well, the Michelin tires go off 50% of the time, but 50% of the time they're brilliant. So there's half a chance Ferrari going to win the championship. It's exactly what happened. That was only 79 they had that. And so it goes on. I think maybe one of the differences today is that Bernie and Charlie are not around to help Ferrari a little bit more. But we'll see. Maybe these new engine revisions, I'm talking about the compression rate. No, not the compression rate. The thing where they can make, upgrades. Ferrari seem to be coming out of that quite well. So we'll see. But it's very political, all that business of Lewis and the money and the glamour and the brand and not getting Adrian and then getting Adrian, then not getting him again. And, it's all too much. It's all a function of too much money, really, I think. A bit like Aston. The problem is the same, but obviously Ferrari are handling it much better than Aston Martin. Jez James, Hi, Peter. I have to say that Daniel Ricciardo openly admitted when he was at McLaren that he had lost some of his touch and feel and that he had at Red Bull. So I believe McLaren were right to replace him. Do you? I think that's exactly why I think he was the right driver for Lando, because what you never wanted was a guy who was going to give Lando a hard time. That's been my point all along. That what you want is the Daniel Ricciardo that won the Italian Grand Prix for McLaren, that could still drive that well, but on the absolute edge was never going to be as quick as Lando. That's exactly my point. So that's why I think he was a perfect driver, where it was obvious that if Oscar Piastri went to McLaren, he was going to be quicker, sharper, everything else than Daniel Ricciardo, which is exactly what you don't want alongside Lando, which is why they had such heavy weather winning the championship last year. Slightly different this year because Oscar doesn't appear to be that driver anymore. I don't know what's going on with Oscar. Well, I'm speculating about what's going on. It's all to do with the way he's not, you know, trying to get into corners, and he's a bit confused, I guess. He's just, trying to look at Lando's telemetry all the time, see where he's leaving. But yeah, I see. My point is, you always want a driver that's slightly slower than the guy that you know is going to win the championship if you have a championship winning car. That's what I've always said and believe to be the case. Riccardo Patrese, Nigel Mansell, Rubens Barrichello, Michael Schumacher. That's what you want. You want guys capable of winning in the other car. If your first car has a problem, you definitely want them to be able to win, and you definitely want them maybe to out-qualify your number one guy a couple of times a year, 3-4 times a year. And that's exactly what I think Daniel would have done. Drew, hi Peter. If Red Bull got the best engine, why doesn't Newey ask his old Red Bull brothers for a discount on a few? Use ADUA money to buy and throw that Honda in the dustbin. Tell Honda stick to VTEC engines. Yeah, well, I think old Phil Prue would definitely dispute Red Bull having the best engine, and they currently are disputing it, I think. Don't forget, we're talking about ICE here, internal combustion. We're not talking about the overall package, because there's no doubt that if you did a list of the engines at the moment, overall performance of every power unit, ICE plus electric, I would say Mercedes head and shoulders above the rest, then Ferrari, then Red Bull, and then I don't know what. No, actually, I'd put Audi ahead of Red Bull probably, given how well they go. So I mean, it's nonsense, this whole thing. It's just got everybody thinking Red Bull have got a great engine. Well, they've got a great ICE, which is what Phil Prue's team did. But in terms of all the electric side of it all, it's a mess, probably. Well, not a mess, but I mean, that's just not as good as the Mercedes or the Ferrari. Definitely than the Ferrari. And I think you can probably, a good litmus test of how good the engine is on the electric side, in other words, the non-ADUO side, is how they get off the line. And Red Bulls are consistently terrible off the line. So, that shows how bad they are as a general power unit. So if you were Adrian, don't forget it's not his team, it's Lawrence Stroll's team. And when Zach Brown found himself running that Honda-powered McLaren team, having taken over from Ron Dennis, even though the Honda engines were worth a delta of about 32 million a year, free engines, maybe more, he decided to chuck that away and go and buy Mercedes customer engines. So he was throwing away the free engine and then paying for the new ones. It was a double whammy. And you could argue, that that was a mistake because financially they lost a lot. And had they addressed the Honda problems in the way that Adrian and the team then addressed them at Red Bull and got Honda sorted, McLaren could have had a brilliant power unit. But they never even tried to do that. They just said, no, this is rubbish, get rid of it, and went to Mercedes. And the proponents of that deal would say, well, look, it resulted in the World Championship and McLaren. Well, that's fine, but they could maybe have done it with Honda. It wasn't impossible. They could maybe have done it with Honda. So the question is now, Adrian lived through all of that, obviously. And so what is he thinking? Is he thinking, well, just keep persevering with Honda because ultimately they will get it right and we'll get it right and we'll be there? Or is he saying to Lawrence Stroll, get rid of this rubbish, let's go to Mercedes? Or, I mean, where would they go? That's the next thing. I can't imagine that Red Bull would feel capable of wanting to do another team. Maybe they would. I don't know. I doubt it. Maybe they'd think, well, I've got Adrian helping us develop that power unit. Wouldn't hurt. Maybe they'd do that. Okay. Drew, Peter, those airplanes on your ceiling, where did you buy them, please? And put the link for us. I need more airplane models. I don't know if you can see them when they're particularly well with the camera I've got at the moment. I'm playing with fire. If I start, yeah, I can probably just tip the old tripod back a bit so you can have a better look at them. There's a couple there. Yeah, a few. My dad made all of them, so I can't pass you a link, sadly. There was I got to know, I've forgotten his first name now. He was the Rowe family, as in Avro, who was a very quick. I'm going to say, I think it must have been Formula Renault. He was quite quick. Bobby Verdon Rowe, there you go, quite quick driver. And I got to know him quite well. And I asked my dad, he commissioned actually in my pushing my dad to make him an Avro 504K, which he did, and I hope Bobby's still got that. A beautiful model. I think I've got the 504K up there actually. Yeah, that was my dad's. He liked the Vickers Vimy and the Avro 504K. Couldn't get more spindly or difficult models to make, but yeah, no, he made them all. He was a brilliant model maker, my dad, and he flew, you know, model aircraft as well, like Ayrton Senna, and loved that. Taylor, hi Peter. Is it true that Al Unser Jr. never got to drive Williams because Patrick Head didn't like him because he wore a Rolex watch? I haven't heard that one. Bearing in mind, Patrick at the time was wearing a Rolex watch. I'm sure, which was the Saudi-faced Rolex that Saudi Arabian Airlines gave Frank. He gave him I think he gave him 3 or 4 watches, and Frank gave one to Patrick after they won the World Championship in 1980. It was green with the Saudi logo on the face of the Rolexes. And so I can't imagine Patrick would have said that. No. I think from memory, from my memory of that was that he was pretty quick, but he was a bit, there wasn't enough burning desire, I think, is the way Mario Andretti would put it. Because Mario used to say that about Michael. You know, he had the burning desire, whereas Jeff had the real raw talent. Andretti, that is. But with Al, I would say, I think Patrick said, he's a bit too much of a sort of superstar IndyCar driver and not enough of a really hungry, dog hungry young kid that wants to get into Formula One. I think there's a bit of that. And he may have used the euphemism, I don't want a guy with a Rolex, I want a guy with a Timex. He might have said that, I doubt it. So I think it was more that. I think Al Unser Jr. would have gone pretty well. But like all these guys, like Michael, he would have needed to have completely changed the way he lived his life to be really successful in a Williams. He would have had to have based himself at, Didcot probably, and become super fit, as light as he possibly could, even in those days, and just generally focused 100% on it. And I imagine Al probably, I don't know this for sure, but had he done the Formula One deal, he probably would have liked to have still done the Indy 500 and maybe a couple of other races. I don't know. I'm probably wrong there, but I just think there was a bit of that. It wasn't enough commitment there, probably. But he was pretty good in the car. He drove it at Estoril, didn't he? Faresca, Rashad, sorry. Faresca. I was going to call you Faresca. Is that all right? Hi, Peter. We all know how great Max is, but if he moves to Mercedes next year, do you believe it could take him a while to get used to a new car and engine? No, I don't. I think if it's a new car and engine, but it's good and it allows him to feel the surface of the road through the steering wheel rim and the back of the seat, he'll be quick straight away. No issues there at all. Might take him a while to adjust how having to race against an unbelievably quick teammate. That's something he's never really had to do for a long time, which he'll enjoy. I mean, he'll only be going there if he relishes that challenge and wants to enjoy the challenge of having somebody really quick in the other car who knows the team and is the incumbent driver, which is a situation Max has never been in, apart from when he went to Red Bull, I suppose, from Toro Rosso. So I'm just going to put this up a bit higher. I know it's falling down a bit, so I keep playing with it. I've never found this whole system to be Elgato. It's a very, very good thing, but I've never got it right. I don't think I'm getting the best from it in terms of angles. I'm trying a different one, which is actually a prelude to doing the live chat this weekend during the race because I'm going to have to be turning my head to the right a lot like that. And I think I've got it so the volume doesn't actually change when I move my head. I think so. Hope so. That's the plan. Smith, who do you think will win Austrian Grand Prix? Lewis or Charles? Max, Lewis or Charles? I'm going to put bet on one of them. Don't ask me for Austria particularly, because I think it's a complete lottery there. You know, Pierre Gasly could win it. Oscar Piastri could win it. You know, it's one of those races where a lot can happen in the first three corners of the race, regardless of where you qualify, because it's so crowded and everybody's quite quick in Austria. As I keep saying, you know, there aren't many corners for the lesser drivers to be slow in. So it's quite a quick lap. Obviously, it's a short lap as well. I don't know. If you wanted to put a punt on somebody, I'd say somebody like Piastri, somebody out of the blue rather than go for the obvious ones, because A, you'd have better odds, wouldn't you? And B, it's that sort of race. You know, if you wanted to call Piastri an outsider, you probably get reasonable odds. He'd be a good guy to go for, I would have thought. George is due for a win, quite clearly. What else? Yeah, maybe Charles, you know, something odd like that, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, Benjamin says, rest in peace, Guy. Yeah, he's definitely in a better place now, I think, after all he's gone through. But what a great person he was. What a great contribution to motor racing he made on the back of Guy. So many sponsorship deals. I mean, he did the first HSBC deal long before Jackie Stewart went to them with his Stewart Formula One team. Guy had done a deal with Heathrow Airport for the use of all the jetways with HSBC. That was a Guy Edwards deal. Unbelievable. Daniel Brodsky, why has it taken so long to enable VSC or safety car? It's often enabled after a guy jumped out of the car, after a guy jumps out. That's always ridiculous, but red flags sometimes dropped immediately. Yeah, there does seem to be some delay, doesn't there? And that, you know, that definitely was, I mean, the Lewis thing in Barcelona was interesting because I think all of us could see that, you know, when Fernando stopped, that it was going to be, it was definitely going to be a VSC or a safety car, no doubt about that. And yet Ferrari didn't just bring him in. It seemed so odd that they had to wait, or did wait. They didn't just bring him in straight away. And they were lucky that it took as long as it did to remove that Aston Martin, because that VSC could have ended before Lewis came in at the end of that next lap, and he wouldn't have won the race then. So, well, he might still have. I doubt it very much, though. And you're right. I think they're just very, I don't know. I just think they're very, we're supposed to be in this era now, the post Abu Dhabi 21 era, where everything has simulations of what potentially could go wrong in the race and how to react in terms of safety car, red flag, this, that. But in doing that, they've extended the time in which they react, because they're presumably running the software to see what to do. I guess that's what's going on. You know, and there's nothing to beat Bernie on the phone to Charlie. You know, Adelaide, when it's pouring with rain, nobody wants to start. Bernie gets to the airport, gets on his phone, rings Charlie and says, "Oh, I'm just about to leave, go back to London, start the race, Charlie." But it's still pouring with rain, Bernie. They're standing. Start the race, Charlie. Start the race. Don't care if it's only 10 laps. Start the race. Let's start. You know, that's the way to run Formula One. Bring it on. And of course, you know, I always thought it was funny going back to Ferrari that in the Bernie era, all of the FIA scrutineering equipment, scales, all the templates, everything you need for that garage was always kept at Bernie's place between races. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure it was fettled and cleaned between each race, and you know, the scales. Nobody would ever touch the scales, would they? Got to be joking. Hey, Charlie, in this race, yeah, don't worry about the Ferrari, and then wait, you know. I'm only joking. Do you think Leclerc, this is from River, do you think Leclerc needs to adapt more of a Rosberg approach if he wants a championship? I see a lot of him buying yachts, doing adverts, social media, plus he seems to be getting left behind on the track. Isn't that what Rosberg did, though? Oh, you're talking about Nico. I thought you were talking about Keke. Who famously once, when Frank asked Carlos Reutemann, what he thought about Keke, how quick Keke was. I think that was the beginning of '82, actually. What do you think, Carlos? What do you think about Keke? Frank, very, very nice Cartier watch. Very nice. So, yeah. No, Nico, yeah, possibly more slimlined in his approach. No, I don't think Charles needs to change that much. I mean, I think I've always said, and I keep saying it, if any racing driver who's got a massive media platform, social media, if they're in a rut, not going well, things aren't right, guy in the other car's blowing them away, the first thing you do is stop all the media stuff, all the social media stuff. That's the first thing you do, because you don't want to have to think about what other people think about you or present an image that isn't really you. You just want to suddenly get down to the bare essentials of what you and motor racing are all about, what you want from the sport, what you want from your racing car, what you want from the surface of the road. Forget everything else around you. Get into this bubble of performance, this cocoon, and go racing. And social media is one of the worst things. It's one of the biggest things to prevent you from doing that, in my opinion. So, yeah, but doing adverts, possibly a lot of those would be Ferrari, part of his contract, I would think. Buying yachts. Yeah, well, I mean, that's just an odd thing to me, because I don't know why anybody buys yachts. Because they depreciate like crazy, and B, they cost a fortune to run when you're not in them. And the days when you are in them having fun, fairly limited, especially if you're a driver like Charles. So yeah, I mean, he's probably thinking, do I really want that yacht? I don't know. I mean, Frank Williams used to buy a lot of aircraft after his accident, but he bought the aircraft because he loved selling the aircraft. And that's a different thing. And he always sold them at a profit. He was very good, Frank. And if Charles maybe he's got a mega chandler somewhere in Monaco who always sells his boats at a profit. So we shouldn't judge on that, really. I imagine he does. It's Charles Leclerc, 47 million. Charles only paid 21 for it, you know. So that could be going on. Anyway, getting back, I know you're being serious and I'm being supercilious. So if he wants to win a championship, and he's got to have a championship winning car, and if he's got a championship winning car, he's then got to beat Lewis Hamilton. And I think he can do that. I think he can do that because by definition, if it's a championship winning car, it'll be a better car than it is now. Because the car, as we see it today, isn't a championship winning car. It's not going to beat a Mercedes over a championship, in my opinion. So if the Ferrari becomes a better car, then it'll be a more drivable car. And if it's a more drivable car, then Charles will get the best from it. I think that's my view. Anna. Hi, Peter. How do you think the heat in Austria will affect this weekend? It's expected to be around 35 degrees. I'm going this weekend. Well, we'll enjoy. Hopefully you won't get too hot in the mountains there. And try and watch from a high place looking down, as distinct from down in the sort of flat area where it's probably a bit of a heat bowl there. But when you get up a little bit, it'll be lovely. But anyway, it's quite high up, isn't it? I don't know how high. It's 500-600, I think. But it's always lovely, thin, beautiful air there. And yeah, well, bear in mind it's going to be what, 38, 40 in London. Austria is going to be cold at 35, but don't forget McLaren are predicting rain anyway. Desperate to get out on those intermediates again. So anything could happen. So they say. Ridiculous, isn't it? Anyway, enjoy, Anna. I'm sure you will. Great place, Austria, love it. And had many a happy weekend there, apart from my first in 72, when I stayed in that dreadful place that I mentioned last time, or 75 for that matter. One of the most amazing Grand Prix of all time, that wet one that Vittorio Brambilla won, and lost as he was going over the start finish line. He lost it, put his hands out for the wheel. The car hit some standing water and went off into the guardrail, but he still won the race, half points race. But that was the weekend we lost Mark Donoghue. So, and I had that horrendous flight back to England in a private aircraft through the Alps with one engine failure. So that was not a good weekend, 75. But the others were all great. And oh no, it was, yeah, the weather ones. But I've had some hot ones there. It's beautiful, beautiful there. Stand in the middle there, the long grass. It's not long grass anymore, is it? Short grass. Very Red Bull. Warren Clarenbeek. Hi, guys. Finally, I can drop a question. Good. Did you hear the conversation between the drivers and Toto? Someone was saying that they got to simple rule if you overtake. That they got to simple rule. So, you're talking about the last race when Mercedes said to them, we're going to have to stop you, going to have to control things if you guys don't quieten down or something like that, they said, didn't they? To which Kimi responded by overtaking George. Yeah, it's going to be the Christian Horner, Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber situation. Yeah, race one another closely, but don't hurt one another, touch one another, don't damage the cars. Yeah, right. You can't do it. You either have a Michael Schumacher contract in which the number 2 driver is not allowed to win the race and has to give the position to Michael, and everybody then goes into it knowing that their 2 guys are never going to fight, within reason. Towards the end of the year, it gets a bit frustrating for the other guy. Or you say, right, stuff it, they go out, they hit one another at every corner, first lap, so be it. It's our problem, our fault for hiring 2 very, very quick guys who are going to do this. Now, in their defense, I don't suppose anybody at Mercedes, even Toto, probably thought that Kimi would be this good, this quick. They probably thought, as I did, and maybe some others, that George would be the dominant driver, but Kimi would win a race or 2 and push him quite hard here and there. But who would have thought that Kimi would dominate George so far in the way that he has? And that's always a problem if you go into it thinking, I don't really care what happens. It's the same with Williams. Nelson Piquet signed a number 1 contract with Williams when he joined in '86 to have use of the spare car at every race. The spare car would have his number, his seats, his pedals, be set up for him. If there was a new part from the factory, but only one of it, it would always go to Nelson first, and he would always have the best of the Honda engines prepared for any given Grand Prix, the one on the dyno that had the most revs, most power. Nelson, that's the contract he got Frank to agree to, and he signed it with Frank. The one thing Nelson didn't put in there, which Frank probably would have agreed to, was, oh yeah, and being number 1 driver, I'll always finish ahead of the other driver on the track. And the reason Nelson didn't do that is because he never imagined Nigel Mansell would be able to beat him. He never imagined, not in a million years, that Nigel could outrace him or outqualify him even. And that's why it ended in tears the way it did. And it's the same with it in every situation like that, and that's the situation Mercedes are in. And I don't think Toto has a solution to it any more than anybody else does, because if Kimi has a chance to win a race, quite clearly he's going to want to win that race. We know that now, regardless of what George Russell's doing. And the team may say to him, Kimi, back off, and if there's a reason, i.e. his temperatures are going off or he's getting tired egg, of course he will. But if everything's perfect, there's no way Kimi, in my opinion now, from here on in, is going to just back off and give wins to George. Why would he? He's a racing driver, and he's shown already how he's going to take the race to George. Great stuff. From our point of view, it's brilliant. Daniel Brodsky. Hi, Peter. Why it looks like Leclerc looks right in left corner. Maybe it's me, but it looks like that from the T-cam. In recent streams, I think you discussed something like that about somebody. Yeah, I discussed it about, I mentioned Peter Rebson used to do a lot of that. An IndyCar driver, admittedly, so he didn't have any neck problems. It was all just, if he's going through going into a right-hander at Silverstone, you'd often see Peter Rebson's helmet leaning a little bit to the left rather than to the right, like most drivers. It's just the way he looked at it. I can't say any more than that. I did ask him about it once, and he said he wasn't aware that he was doing it and kind of was confused by the question. And I suspect it's the same. I mean, you're saying that about Charles. Somebody else said Carlos Sainz does that. I've been looking for examples of that, haven't really seen any yet, and I'll continue to look for Charles. Maybe Lewis leans a little bit more than Charles. It's actually quite difficult also to see these days in these current cars. You can look at the top of the helmet and you can see the angle a little bit, but it's not as easy to look really as it used to be because of the halo and how low they sit and all the surround on the cockpit. But I don't think the angle of the head has any relationship to one driver's ability to have perfect rates of input and harmony compared with another driver who doesn't, who's slightly imperfect. I don't think that's an indication of anything. I think it's more just the way you feel balance. If you're on a surfboard or you're water skiing, it's just the feel, the peripheral vision that you've got. It's just that, really. It's just a balance thing. That's how you get your balance. Wherever your head is, that's basically where you feel balance. That's where you feel the equilibrium. Warren Clarenby, imagine him to be Max Verstappen, and if he would leave you some space. Yeah, well, I mean, I need to look back at what that period. These guys, someone was saying that they got a simple rule to overtake, which is imagine him to be Max Verstappen, and if he would leave you some space. Not quite sure. The simple rule is don't overtake then, really, because Max isn't going to leave anybody any space. So they're saying to Kimi, unless you've got space, don't try and overtake. What is space, though? The track's relatively wide. It's at least 2 cars width, if not more. So how can you, what defines space if you're racing your teammate? That's my point. Again, it's one thing if it's Kimi against Max in different cars, but if it's Kimi against George, and George is actually, I mean, when Toto and the team in the garage are thinking about applying team orders, let's say George is leading Kimi, do they ever take into account George's wider corner approaches and what that must look like to Kimi when he's coming up, I don't know, to turn 10? Good example in Barcelona, when George is definitely wider going into 10, and Kimi always has that thing where he goes down deep on the inside and then runs wide mid-corner. And I'm not saying he would ever do that because he wouldn't T-bone George, obviously, but from the moment they're just approaching that corner, from Kimi's point of view, it looks like George is almost giving him space to go down the inside. That's what it always used to look like when Nigel was racing Nelson Piquet. It always looked to him initially that Nelson was giving him room, and Nelson wasn't. He was just doing his normal thing. Then he'd shut the gate, and Nigel quickly realised that after, one lap or so of dicing. And Kimi probably realises it too. But does George realise that? Do the guys in the garage know that that's going on all the time, and how tempting that must be for Kimi Antonelli on certain corners? Do they say to George, start to turn in a bit earlier, mate, otherwise it's going to end with problems? Or do they say to Kimi, when you're behind George, you must turn in wider and later? I don't think they do. And anyway, that would just increase the temperatures. And from Kimi's point of view, think about this. It's just occurred to me, but if Kimi's following George, he's potentially going to be less subjected to heat from George as the other way round, because quite a lot of the time he's naturally going down inside of George and not directly behind George. Whereas if George is behind Kimi, he's always going to be going in late, and then even if Kimi turns in early, he's still going to get a lot of the heat coming across. Interesting. Faresk again. Hi, Peter. During Schumacher debut years, did he show any kind of respect to Senna? And how does Senna look at this young German? Yeah, no, Senna definitely. I was trying to think of examples. Senna definitely knew that Michael was very quick and very systematic and very intelligent, and was going to win a lot of races. For sure, Senna knew that. What is my evidence for saying that? I can really only speak about my experience with Nigel, because I was very close to Nigel and I was running the team, obviously the Williams team at that point. So, and I think what Nigel's approach to Michael's arrival would have been very similar to Ayrton's, which was, he's German, so he's not going to be crazy. He's very, very bright. Seems a bit crazy about football, but he's quick. We got to race him. I remember, Michael. I mean, how did he feel? How did Senna look at this young German, and what respect did he show to Senna? I don't think it was any different from any other driver, other than that they knew how good Senna was. I don't think, Michael never went out of his way to talk massively about how quick Senna was, or vice versa, and Nigel didn't at the time. Obviously, when it all went wrong at Imola in '94, then all the emotions came out. And when And when years later Michael broke one of Ayrton's records, he was actually in tears, wasn't he? At Monza, I think it was. And that was just emotion of Ayrton and Ayrton as a person and Ayrton and what he'd stood for in racing. But I don't, there's a lot of aura around Ayrton. And I'm just trying to be realistic. And at the time, one day followed another, one race followed another. And you didn't have moments where you thought, oh, this guy is unbelievably good. Ayrton thinking that about Michael or vice versa, or Nigel, thinking that about either. They're just race drivers that got in their car and did their thing. They're different things between races. And they weren't friends, I don't think, anymore, but they were, respectful of one another. That's about all I can say, really. I think that's about all anyone can say. Alessandro Durango. Hi, Peter. Nico Rosberg warned Charles that Lewis can be mentally overwhelming for a teammate and urged him to react quickly. In my view, Charles has the resilience to handle that pressure. I think he's right that Lewis can overwhelm you any more than any driver can if he gets a sweet spot and he's as good as Lewis and he's going to start going quickly and he's found the way to drive that car well. But what does he mean by Charles should react quickly? Does he mean Charles should say, well, Nico's got a point there. Last 3 races, I've just been half asleep, not doing anything at all. And I better wake up and start driving the car. Is that what he thinks? I mean, of course, Charles has been driving absolutely flat out as he knows how. So, what I'd be interested to know from Nico would be, does he think Charles should adopt a sort of more Nico Rosberg-like style of slightly longer straights than he had when he was racing against Lewis, and getting on the power a little bit later, but being sure of the rear and doing, and particularly in this power harvesting era? Or should he continue to do what he does incredibly well and go in early and shorten as many corners as he possibly can in the way that Nico never did? Is that what I'm interested to know? Which what Nico thinks Charles should do? As I say, if you're going to give advice, it should be fairly simple, basic advice that people can actually understand and react to. Mine personally, not that Charles would ever ask my advice, I guess, but mine would be get rid of all the social media and stop looking at Lewis's telemetry, drive the way Charles Leclerc has always driven, and use the brakes you've always used. And if it's not working, just increase the length of the straights a little bit going in, brake a little bit more in a straight line, but not by much, but keep all the softness and suppleness that you managed to lose in Barcelona Friday, Saturday, and just go back to where you were and then just come back a little bit in terms of braking in a straight line. That's what I would do. Harvest a bit more power efficiently. Smith Gaming, who do you think will win Austria Grand Prix? Lewis, well, we've had this one. You're going to put money. Yeah, well, don't ask 2, mate, because we've got so many questions and it's not fair to everybody else if you put 2 questions in. In that clip with Christian Lundgaard, you sounded even more like Patrick Stewart. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I was quite pleased with that little clip, bearing in mind it was done, 6 years ago. It's not an absolutely terrible bit of video, is it? Young Christian Lundgaard. Lewis is a remarkable Formula One driver. Well, that he is. That's an understatement of the year. He's one of the best of all time, and definitely we should be talking about Lewis as an 8-time world champion, even today. It's not fair that he isn't, really. Have you seen K-Mag's NASCAR race? No, I haven't. What's Matt Bishop up to? Normally, whenever K-Mag does anything, I get a message from Matt Bishop telling me what his mate's been up to. So I better Google that one, K-Mag NASCAR. What did he do? I think he'd be quite good at that, wouldn't he? He'd be completely underwhelmed by it all and would just get in and do it. Here we go. Recap on the on-track clash between Gragson and Magnussen. Noah Gragson, F1's Kevin Magnussen have heated exchange in San Diego. Good stuff. Kevin Magnussen earns special accolade in first NASCAR start. If you just look at the finishing order, Kevin Magnussen finishing P27 on debut isn't big news. That sounds about right. He ran every lap, kept his car clean, and even had a moment or 2 with other drivers. While Magnussen's 91 Trackhouse Racing Chevy was in the back of the pack, the former Formula One driver recorded the fastest lap of the race. Then a few laps to go, Magnussen ripped to roughly 8 tenths quicker than the next time. Very good. Well, there you go. He's won it Xfinity fastest lap. So, well, good for him. He's a good guy, K-Mag, isn't he? He's just a racer. He's just absolute racer, and he'll fit in well with whatever he does in America. Good luck to him. So we'll get Mark Slade on K-Mag. He's a big K-Mag fan as well, isn't he? MR Gunkraft, Mr. Gunkraft. Do you think Ferrari can match Mercedes from now on till the end of the season? Well, at the moment, they're beating Mercedes on reliability. So if they can keep that up, that'll be a major advantage. If Mercedes still continue to have a few issues, nothing like finishing a race when your opponent doesn't to score some points. In terms of performance, no, I still think the factory Mercedes is the best car package out there, including the power unit. But there will be circuits and situations in which Ferrari won't be far away. And at the moment, as I say, they're more reliable. But I think it's still very much Mercedes going. Yeah, Sebastian Bourdais has been racing an endurance race series for years after losing his F1 seat. Yeah, I know. Terrible, isn't it? And Teo Pourchaire's another one. You know, he's now, what's he done? Run for Alpine or something. All these guys. I mean, Bourdais was not, where he's fourth, I think, in that race that Vettel won for Toro Rosso. I mean, if Vettel hadn't won that, everyone would be saying, wow, what a brilliant race for Sebastian Bourdais. No, he's a quick driver, you know. A lot of these guys never really, I mean, obviously he had that Formula One opportunity, but again, Formula One is very fickle. Okay, Anna says the rain can come very unexpectedly on hot days like that one in the mountains with thunderstorm cells, often only showing up on the radar an hour before them happening. This is in Austria, yeah. Okay, well, we shouldn't be too cocky about McLaren's comments then and be ready and to praise them when they can get out on those intermediates. The more they talk about it, the more the rain might come. At the moment, though, it's forecast to be very, but maybe that hot weather will bring the rain, as you say, but we'll see. I think Pirelli, they're doing some sort of FIA looking at the performance of the power units, how they're going to adjust that if it does rain as well. So that'll be interesting to see, I guess, kind of. Tenic3359. Hi, Peter. Do you think Red Bull can ever get back to its top tier ways post Horner? How long do you think it'll take? Do you mean post Horner or post Newey? I think you mean, well, I mean, obviously you mean post Horner, but what I'm trying to say is I think it's more Newey. I think if Newey was still at Red Bull, Newey hadn't left, and the team now is run by Laurent Mekies, exactly as it is. Would the car be better? Yeah, I think it would. So it's more about engineering. Any team is always about engineering how good or bad the car is. I mean, look at Aston Martin. Doesn't matter who you've got running that team, doesn't matter what drivers you've got. If you don't have a car, everything's a waste of time. So it's all about engineering. And the question is, are Red Bull on the verge of going further down, or are they on the verge of having gone into a bit of a slump and on the way up? And we'll see. Over the next 4 or 5 races, we'll see whether Red Bull are back where they used to be in the Newey era, when if they did have a bad race, they didn't get the car right, within a race or two, they were right back up. Newey always managed to get it sorted. But it's been long enough now for Red Bull, I think, and we should all be looking closely in the next 3 or 4 races to see what happens. And if Max doesn't have a car that'll put him on at least the first 2 rows in Austria, then we know Red Bull have got a real problem. Silverstone the same, because it's pretty much a chassis circuit. Spa, yeah, you could give them, you know, okay, the power unit, if you include the electrics, won't be brilliant around there, I would imagine. Hungary, again, you know, if Max isn't top 4 in Hungary, then we'll know that Red Bull are definitely in a decline, and that Max probably will be thinking, this ain't going to get any better. Need to think about what I'm going to do next year. Number 1 driver for GT3, Porsche team, Mercedes team, whatever. Josh G's Lewis was right about them Brembo brakes the whole time. Them Brembo brakes. Was he? I'm not sure he was. Anyway, we'll see. I think he's, Lewis has always, up until Ferrari, has always used carbon industry, and he's always done very well on carbon industry, which has a certain, there's a slight, it's more to do with temperatures, I think, than anything else. But talking to drivers who've raced on both, there definitely is a difference in pedal feel. And certainly that was the case with Fernando when he went to McLaren. And the Brembos, yeah, Lewis is probably right in not wanting to have the pedal feel and all the other dramas that come with the Brembos, and the carbon industry is what he likes. But does that mean the Brembos are not doing the job? I'm not sure it does. That's my point. And I, yes, there was a period when the Brembos did seem to be, about 2 years ago, it seemed to be a bit all over the place with temperature control. But no other team seems to be having issues with them. And Ferrari are their number one, Brembo's number one client. And Charles arguably is their number one driver. It's hard to believe that Brembo aren't giving Charles what he wants. And that's more Charles asking of the car things that the car can't give him. I think it's more that, but they're kind of looking at the brakes now because Lewis has gone to the carbon industries. I personally think that is the issue. User, hi Peter, why is Oliver Behrman called Ollie Behrman? I don't recall anyone calling Lewis Louis Hamilton back in 2008. No, it's a good point, isn't it? And I've up until this year, I think I've always called him Oliver as well. And then I just heard people starting to call him Ollie. And now I see they're calling him, what's the, well, I mean, it's a funny thing, this whole business, because there was Ernesto Vizo was in Formula 2, and he was always Ernesto Vizo. When he got to America, it was EJ Vizo, EJ. Everything changed. And Jackie Stewart, Jack Oliver, and then it became Jackie Oliver, spelt differently. And yeah, it's, they call him Gabby Bortoletto now, don't they, on the radio? Are we going to call him Gabby now or Gabriele? I don't know. So, yeah, I suspect Oliver answers to Ollie and Oliver. If you asked him what he liked, probably he would say he doesn't really care, but I don't know. Maybe say, only my mates call me Ollie. Call me Oliver. You know where you stand. Yeah, anyway, good question. I think on the back of that one, user, I'm going to call him Oliver from now on. I think you're right. Rajan Sharma, Lewis is so strong coming back psychologically after 21, testament to his inner strength. Lewis is still the best in class. Well, yeah, I mean, he kept going. I think that was the thing. In a year of bewilderment, I think in 22, 23, yeah, he put his head down and started to get his act together around what was still a very difficult car, because retirement was not really in his mind. And I guess after Abu Dhabi, that would have been even more so. I've got to come back and I've got to start winning races again. And that's amazing. And I've always said, given how enormous his brand is, how huge his footprint is, global footprint, Lewis has done an absolutely stunning job of still being Lewis Hamilton when he gets to a racetrack, and diluting a lot of the stuff that's around him into the very important issues and getting on with them. I think he's a victim of telemetry and a lot of information that perhaps is not the sort of thing that is going to bring out the best from Lewis. And I think he's found his way at Ferrari now of focusing on making them focus on the things that are important to him. And I don't think that was going on when he was in those years with George at Mercedes, because it was all a flurry of, well, George is braking here, George is turning in there, George has got the power on here. And all of that was confusing for Lewis because he'd never really had to do that sort of stuff. Obviously with Nico, it was a fairly pinpointed approach to what he could benefit from, learn from Nico. Same with Jenson Button, as we were talking about earlier. But with George, I don't think he learned anything from George because the car was too difficult and too bad. and he was spending all his time just trying to get the best from the car, which he never really did, probably to his own standards. And now he's with these new regs and everything they require in terms of how you harvest the brakes, harvest the power under braking. Lewis has found that the style, ironically, he developed to survive those years at Mercedes is working perfectly for him at Ferrari. Good luck to him. All that strength and all that hard work is paying off in a way that nobody in the world could have predicted. Nissan. Hi, Peter. Do team personnel gossip with each other? Do their opinions about which driver to drive for the team matter because they're the one who will be working closely with the driver? Um, do you mean intra-team gossip or inter-team gossip? Inter-team gossip, I don't think has ever been a big thing. Most mechanics, engineers, anyone involved with the team have always been, in my experience, pretty loyal to the team. Intra-team, uh, it's more just in terms of mechanics, for example, they are mechanics on Lewis's car will feel a certain belonging to that car and to that driver. And it won't be that they will in any way disparage the other side of the garage and Charles. It'll just be they want their guy and their car to win the race. And it's a very healthy competition. And it's always basically been like that in Formula One. If you think about Roger Hill on Jackie Stewart's car or Joe Ramirez on Francois Seber's car, to take an example, going back to the 70s, exactly the same thing. It just Joe wanted more than anything else. He wanted Francois to win that Grand Prix. But if he needed to go and help the Jackie Stewart car on a suspension rebuild deep into the night, he would do it, obviously. And I think it's always been like the way in Formula One. People are very, very competitive, but they're also very professional in general. Obviously, you get one or two bad apples, but in general, everyone's very, very professional. And as much as a Lewis mechanic will be very loyal to Lewis and want Lewis to win that race, if the Charles car needs an additional person at some point, bang, they'll be over there doing the job. So there we go. For so many years, trail brake. Josh G's, the Renault, the Williams partnership in the early 90s was dope. What's that mean? Does that mean it was so good you were high? Is that what we mean? I think Jimmy Jock Walter, our fuel man, was pretty high most of the time on the elf fuel that they used to use, that's for sure. Here's a super chat. Thank you very much for Sadak. Very kind. Thank you. Prime Vettel or Prime Alonso? If you had to build a team around one of them, same question for Prime Schumacher versus Prime Hamilton. Definitely Alonso in my case. I love Alonso's just general approach to racing. I think not to politics and within racing, but he's a racer. I love Fernando's love of karting and his feel for driving and just wanting to race and drive a quick car well. So yeah, you'd have more fun, I think, with Alonso. Build a team around them. I think it's the operative word there, because the only way you could run Alonso would be if you did build the team around him. Probably Vettel these days as well, but there is no way you could have Alonso and not build a team around him, because what's the point of having Alonso? And he would make that very clear from day one. Prime Schumacher, Prime Hamilton. Oof. You're talking Michael here. I'm just trying to split hairs while I have a drink and think about it. Well, actually, you've kind of given it away, building a team, because if I was building a team and building a team, let's presuppose I've got $1 trillion to build a team and I don't have any personnel, and I've got to start from scratch. I think if you took Michael at his prime, let's say Michael 2002, and said, right, Michael, you can have half the money or whatever. We're going to do a team together. What should we do? These are the engineers I want. What engineers do you think you should have? What engineers would you recommend? What mechanics would you like to have? I think you could put together a pretty good team. If you did the same with Lewis, let's say Lewis 2021, would he have the same feel for people in other teams and engineers and designers as Michael? Probably not, because Lewis has always been just much more of a pure racing driver. Lewis Hamilton, Inc., as distinct from Michael Schumacher, Ferrari, Inc. And as much as Lewis is now part of Ferrari, he's still Lewis Hamilton, the racing driver. And put another way, what engineers are at Ferrari now because Lewis is there? He's gone in there and he's working with Ferrari. All credit to him for doing that. But that's the difference between the two. You know, Michael took a lot of people with him and basically said to Ferrari and Jean Todt, if you want me, this is how it's going to be. So yeah, if I had that budget and it was an empty team, empty box to be filled, I would do it with Michael at his peak, I think. Faresh, hi Peter. Why was the relationship between Max and Ron so bad? Well, I think you can't, I don't think you can leave Bernie out of that because Max was Bernie's guy for a long, long time. And when, Max became FIA president because Bernie enabled that. And when that happened, Bernie then had control of World Motorsport because he had Max in as FIA president, basically doing whatever he, Bernie, and Max decided. Well, whatever Bernie wanted to do, he then convinced Max to do it. So I can't think of any situation in which Max said, no, I'm not going to do that, Bernie, in the way Jean Todt immediately did when he found himself FIA president with Bernie's endorsement. No, Max was always Bernie's guy and didn't really, he didn't blow his nose without Bernie's permission. So when you say that, you also have to bring Bernie in. So then the question is, why was Ron always up against Bernie and Max? And it's a complicated answer. And I don't know the full answer, but I think it goes back a long way. It probably goes back to when Ron was buying Brabhams from Bernie in 1972. And it certainly gathered pace when Ron became Mr. Marlborough budget controller with John Hogan in Formula One and was starting to produce huge motorhomes, and his garage was the first one to be painted on the floor and then to have the ceramic tiles on the floor. And that got up Bernie's nose a bit because Bernie, I think, always felt that he was that guy. And he was the one that had a Pasquale out there making sure that every motorhome was in line to within half a centimetre as you walked down the pit lane. And yet a lot of the media started to say, oh, Ron Dennis is unbelievable and his attention to detail. Whereas Bernie used to think of himself, I'm sure, as the man who is Mr. Attention to Detail, nobody greater than Bernie. So there was always that bit of friction, I think. And then Bernie, I think Ron then exacerbated it all by when he became very successful with Mansour and Marlboro and everything else. I think and then later on the other cigarette companies, I think that point, Ron was the sort of ringleader of always thinking quite realistically that they could do a breakaway Formula One group from Bernie and therefore Max, and they could survive and do that because they felt Bernie wasn't giving them a big enough slice of the cake, and that it would all be more equitable if they did their own championship. And I think that was the real underlying issue there, that Bernie never trusted Ron to be one of the, one of the minions on the ship of which Bernie, was captain. And Ron never really wanted to be on Bernie's ship. He wanted to be on Formula One's ship and wanted it to be run the way he thought it should be run. So there was always that. And Bernie was always in control, of course. And that's why when they found eventually some grounds on which to penalize Ron, Bernie immediately told Max to do this. And Max thought it was a brilliant idea and loved it because he, through all this time, had agreed with Bernie and their distaste for Ron Dennis. And apart from that, I suppose I should add here, Max, very well educated, public school education, son of Sir Oswald Mosley, famous fascist politician, known for his racist views. I'm not saying Max was a racist at all, but I'm saying that was his upbringing. And then Ron being a bit of an upstart mechanic who, created a massive empire from nothing really, from being a mechanic at Cooper's. And I suppose there was a sort of class thing there as well. Resentment, no, but certainly class, guffawing behind the hand at some of Ron's diction or lack of eloquence. And so there would have been that as well. And anything to sort of annoy Ron, Bernie and Max would have thought would be quite funny. And when they came up with the $100 million fine, it was, of course, the number that Ron had agreed with Ferrari would be paid to Ferrari if Ferrari joined the breakaway deal of 2009. And that never happened in the end, but Bernie got to hear about that. So when the potential came up to have him fined, what did they choose? The $100 million. And that was why that happened. So it was a lot of bad blood over a lot of years. And on Ron's side, there were plenty of occasions when he would have said to Bernie, I've got the chairman of this company coming to Monaco. I need a couple of passes. Sorry about the short notice, Bernie. And Bernie would say no. And things like that, it just would have got worse and worse. A big question. It's almost a show in itself as well, because that also leads up, obviously, into Spygate. Trail Break 3, worst circuit ever. Worst circuit ever. Interesting question. Have to be one of those. I think we raced in Korea, didn't we, when all that funny business was going on? They're building new circuits everywhere. I remember that not being very good. I wasn't there, so I can't really say, but it's not very good, I don't think. Maybe the circuit that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, the Zeltweg airfield L-shaped circuit. They just went down runway, turned into a right-hander, another straight, hairpin left, down another straight, down to another left-hander, down the runway, into a hairpin and back to the start. And the timing race control was an old double-decker bus. And what did the damage to all the suspensions were all the seams of tarmac across the runways. And all the cars fell apart. Probably. No, Las Vegas, worst circuit. No, I wouldn't have said that at all. I quite enjoyed Vegas. As a Grand Prix, it was a great Grand Prix. Fabulous atmosphere. One of the best races I ever went to. As a circuit, yeah. Sorry, I'm confused now. I was thinking about Dallas. Vegas road circuit, sorry. Or you're thinking Vegas today? I was about to mention Dallas. That's why I was about to say, a lot of people say Dallas, but I quite was into Dallas. But Vegas is the worst circuit. Okay, well, I won't dispute that really. 81 was not good in the car park of the Caesars Palace Hotel. And it was just like, psh, like this with concrete walls everywhere. Temporary concrete walls, bumpy, very hot. And this one's, yeah, DRS special, isn't it? Las Vegas is public road. Oh, you can't include that as a circuit. Oh, well, yeah. Aaron, hey, Peter, I'll keep thinking about that worst circuit thing. I'm sure there are other good examples of worst circuits. I mean, you'd have to say Avus probably wasn't a great Grand Prix circuit either, because that was just two parallel straights, the Autobahn in Berlin, with a sort of hairpinish corner thing at the bottom at one end and massive banking at the other, incredibly bumpy. And in the light rain, undrivable, as sadly Jean Bera found out in '59 when he went over the top and was killed. So in a sports car. So yeah, I would say Avus, not a great track either. Maybe Monza banking circuit as well, not great. Teenager killed in a rally in Donegal Island. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, very sorry. MBS wants V8 2.4 litre engines with 800 horsepower, 680 weight with a 90-10 split. Is this just to make fans on his side so he can increase term limit of the FIA president? Definitely. Or is it real? Well, I think it's got to be real, isn't it? Because if it's just to have, well, if the president of the FIA, MBS, now thinks that the fans of the world would want to have 2.4 litre engines, 880 horsepower, and he's correct, in my opinion. I think we all would, or most of us would. If he's capable of thinking that, then by definition, that is why he's saying it, because it's not as if he's making up something and hoping that people will like it. He's actually done his homework in that he understands what it is people really want. So if, I mean, answer to your question, if that then makes him, sorry, let me rephrase, that has no impact on how people vote for him, however, because it's not the fans that vote him, it's vote for him. It's all the delegates around the world of the FIA, every country having exactly the same vote. So I don't think, I mean, if he wanted to change the constitution, I don't know if you have to do that and increase the term limit, it would still be subject, I would imagine, to all of the votes around the world. And don't forget, he was a rally driver, and so he's not as if he's some Jean-Marie Balest. He actually he probably got quite a few people that know something about driving and racing. I'm not in any way defending him or either way, really. I'm just saying, give him credit is all I'm saying. If he's saying that, good luck to him, because it would, if equally, it would be quite easy to say, probably, I think we should stay exactly as we are because we've got Audi, we've got Cadillac, we might get Toyota, and isn't this great? And he could say that to all the delegates and everybody else, even more money, and we're doing a great job. Let me continue for a third term. Look what's happened. He could use both arguments quite well if you're a politician, I would have thought. Of course, you could use the second argument well because, look, it's worked. So I would say give him credit. There's a lot of flack about him. I would say give him credit at the moment for that. And who knows, it might actually happen. Yeah, right. Chris Ram, do you think the temperature in Southeast Asia is too warm hot to race Formula One despite the night race? I do actually, yeah. Well, Singapore's so unbearably hot. And it is a bit cooler at night. And it's still unbelievably hot. There's not a lot of wind there, really. I think it would be good always to hold Asian races in a place where there's a lot of fresh air and wind, top of mountains. Now, being facetious, obviously. No, I mean, in terms of actually not a country not staging a race because it might be too hot, no, I don't think that's, I don't think that's ever going to be a reason. Money will always rule on everything. And you have to, if worst comes to worst, you just find the coolest part of the 24-hour period. And if that's 4 in the morning, you stage it at 4 in the morning and you work around that. And we kind of do that at Singapore, don't we? The whole thing's on a different time zone, and yet by the time it's actually put on at night, it's on the same European time zone. So, and Dallas was 8 o'clock in the morning, I think, wasn't it? When we had warm-ups, then the warm-up was something like 7:30 in the morning. It's doable. Carlo says 5:34 in Canada. Just woke up. Cheers. Hi there. Love Canada. I bet it's a beautiful morning there. Even if it's not, it's, good place. If it's pouring with rain and cold, down the road, the old coffee shop, get going. Tour de France starts next month in that heat. Yeah, well, so does Wimbledon. And there's quite a lot of sport going on in that heat as well. British Open, not quite as bad for them because they're on the coast, links course, but certainly Wimbledon, Tour de France, wouldn't want to be doing that. Curse Las Vegas, says incongruent tart you are. Singapore too. Really? No, I wouldn't curse Singapore. Really? Well, I think Singapore, for what it is an amazing event. Just the look of it, even before they run the cars, looks brilliant under lights. Those Paoli lights that Bernie set up. Paoli being the company that did a lot of the early electronics for Brabham when he owned Brabham. Got to know the guys there and gave them the contract to do the lighting for Singapore. So yeah, no, it's a very good, and more than anything else, that race is a absolute testament to Bernie and everything he did in Formula One, isn't it? Night race in Singapore couldn't be bigger or better, really. We take it for granted now alongside all the other ones, I suppose. But for me, Singapore is still the jewel in the crown, the Orient crown, anyway. Incongruent Tatuar says, apparently many secret projects exist under Vegas. Those working there can't leave. All those themed casinos also have a very different purpose. Really? we're talking about it, the whole thing at Nellis Air Force Base, and then we go out into that whole, what's it, that area where it's UFO territory. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of incongruence in capital letters. I think we'll move on there. Peter, is it coming home? What's that? I'm not quite sure. I am at home, if that's what you're asking, but I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. So, Cosmos Trek. Peter, why did Lotus put Clark and Hill together if there should be a number 1 and number 2 driver? Very good question. I'll tell you why. Because Jim Clark, apart from anything else, remains the only great Grand Prix driver with enough charm and humility never to assert himself over anybody else under anything other than just pure racing terms. And along the same lines, you might like to ask why, when it was pretty obvious that Jimmy won the 66 Indy 500 and there was a lap scoring error, as now conceded by USAC, quote Nigel Roebuck, did Jimmy nonetheless attend Graham Hill's victory celebrations at Mill Hill back in England a couple of days later and make no issue about it at all? Because he was a gentleman. And it's the same with Graham at Lotus. He was a gentleman. He knew how to race against Graham. Graham knew how to race against Jim. They were both gentlemen, actually, in that sense. And so you didn't need to do it. It was very, very, it was a wonderful time. And whenever Graham was quicker than Jimmy, Jimmy would always say, wow, yeah, great lap by Graham Hill there. He's really quick. And then Jimmy would go win the race. So it says a lot about Jim Clark, doesn't it? Science Junior to Audi. Well, I've been saying that he should have gone to Audi for what, at least 2 years now. So I hope you're right. But who, why, how? I mean, Nico Hulkenberg may retire, but he could take Nico's seat in a year or two. I hope he does. He should have been at Audi a year ago. Signing a mega long-term contract to represent the brand and all the rest of it. And if the penny's finally dropped, then I'm very pleased. But I don't know why it's taken this long for it to drop. So yeah, a lot of right. Where are we? David Brown 8517 says the Gen 4 Formula E cars are going to be faster than Formula 1 cars around Monaco. Really? Exactly the same Monaco circuit. Wow. That's a bit worrying, isn't it? I mean, I'm still trying to recover from the shock that a Grand Prix car weighs more than my road car. And that's, that I never thought that would happen. I always thought my road cars would be at least twice as heavy as a Grand Prix car, if not more. I always see Formula 1 cars as light and agile and brilliant under braking, amazing cornering load and grip. But they're heavier than my road car now. I drive a Lotus Elan, by the way. I read that Aston Martin is rebuilding the entire car. Well, I think they rebuild every car between every race. So it depends what you mean by that. But redesigning it from start to finish, I think it's quite difficult to do within the budget cap now, is it not? Otherwise, a lot of people would have done that, like Mercedes in 2022. But yeah. Do we actually know? Has anybody actually heard any interviews at all? I haven't, where they've had anybody's had the intelligence to ask Fernando, putting aside the power drama, what is the car like to drive? Is it quick? Is this a super quick car waiting for a decent engine? Is that what you've got at the moment, Fernando? I've never heard anybody ask that question, and I want to know what the answer to that is, because he must know by now if it's a good car or not. He must do, surely. AMR 26B, B standing for Beast in the Paddock. Well, maybe. Right, we've got a lot more chat about Formula E. And we're going to have to draw a line under this pretty soon. Aston Martin needs to get rid of Stroll. He's a useless waste of space. Yeah, but he owns the team, surely. Oh, you mean Lance Stroll? I mean, whichever Stroll you're referring to, it ain't going to happen because they own the team. They pay the wages. And I've always said, when you go to a team that is owned by one person, who may or may not one day lose interest in the sport and disappear. It's a pretty fragile, risky thing to do. That's why I'm still confused by Adrian. As I said, the only thought there has got to be that when that happens, Adrian gets 100% of the shares. I guess that's why he's gone there, and then he'll start to move mountains, I guess. But yeah, the Stroll Salon. I think everybody at Aston Martin must think we've got to keep Lance Stroll happy, because if we don't, his dad might walk away tomorrow and take all his money with him, and then we'll be out of a job. So they've got to keep Lance happy. And Fernando thinks for sure, if it wasn't for Lance, I wouldn't have a drive now, probably. Where would Fernando be if he wasn't here? So there you go. Cosmo says, Michael commuted back and forth to England on the Concorde during his Formula season. Yeah, that's right. He didn't do a very good job. And I think that would have been the same with Al Jr., would have done the same thing, probably, is my understanding. So that was one of the other things there. But yeah, Michael just didn't really. It was a good job they had Concorde, actually. Well, a bad thing, actually, because if Concorde hadn't existed, maybe he wouldn't have done that, and maybe he would have stayed at Colnbrook, in Woking, by McLaren, and that would have been much better for his career. But anyway, only Chris Welch. Hope you're doing well, Peter. I am indeed. Thank you very much. Moop. Lewis hasn't done well in Austria, so I'm going to bet he's had a bad weekend and everybody goes back to Hamilton should retire. LOL. Really? I mean, I'm not aware of those things, because to me, how a driver goes at a circuit is so related to the car he's been driving and circumstances at the time. It's not because Lewis isn't quick in Austria or isn't capable of winning a Grand Prix in Austria. It's like saying, oh, well, Nigel Mansell had a terrible record at Monaco. Yeah, guess what? He's one of the fastest drivers ever to drive the Monaco lap. So it's nothing to do with whether he's good there. Jim Clark, the same. Jim never won Monaco, but he was always mega quick there. Just the car never lasted. So, Truth Kit. Hi, Peter. I'm still in Barcelona. Can you believe it? The joy of seeing Lewis crossing the finish line in Abu Dhabi for his 8th championship. Oh, boy. Absolute joy. Yeah, well, I think it was some retribution for that, wasn't it? For what happened in Abu Dhabi. But racing, things happen so quickly and we move on so quickly, like this show already, But yeah, it was a great moment, and I hope a lot of people savored that, as we were lucky to. The only Chris Welch. Why are Formula One teams these days going for fantasy lineups like Leclerc and Hamilton, which ends in tears for the number one driver? I always prefer the Hamilton, Bottas, Norris, Ricciardo partnerships. Well, yeah, absolutely, snap. And it's because there's a lot of ego there when you've got money and you've got the power to choose the drivers. There's a big ego trip in signing Lewis Hamilton and getting rid of Carlos Sainz. And that goes back to dear old Frank Williams, who, on many occasions, I would find a young guy with talent, Mark Webber, good example, and try to sell him to Frank when he was still at Formula Ford level or Formula 3. And Frank would say, well, if he's that good, why has nobody else signed him? Or something innocuous like that. But then again, the reality of Frank is that one of the things he enjoyed most about running a Formula One team, owning a Formula One team, was the selection of the drivers and signing the drivers. And he loved signing drivers for more money than Ron Dennis was paying. That became a bit of a race. So he didn't really enjoy signing a young guy and getting a great talent on an amazing deal where very little money had to be spent. He loved paying, 20 million for Ralf Schumacher. That was part of the ego trip. And I suspect it's the same today. John Elkann has the power and the money to sign Lewis Hamilton, and all the negotiations and all the meetings with Lewis. Loved it all, for sure. And so he did it. Easy to fire Carlos Sainz. Bit boring, probably, from his point of view. So it's all of that. Got to have two. Now, credit to Toto Wolff. That isn't the case with Kimi Antonelli. He's a young kid who just happens to have blown the number one driver away in the way Nigel blew Nelson and Keke Rosberg away. And that's a different thing altogether. But yeah, if you've got Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, why do you want to go on an ego trip and sign Oscar Piastri? when he's got a contract in Formula One anyway, and you can put him on some sort of deal and get him in a year or two? Why? What's the point? Oh yeah, got to get him now. Faster than Daniel. Got to get him. So what are we doing here? Right. Trail break. David Coulthard stated that Lewis would have won regardless of the safety car with his pace. Yeah, I mean, I said the same thing. I thought the pace he had at the end was astronomical. Of course, what we don't know is what would have happened once he'd caught up with Kimi and George, who were having their own fight. And George, as we now know, was battling a bit of understeer. And Kimi was intent on beating George, but would have wanted to beat Lewis as well. And how much that would have hurt Lewis behind them in aero and the wind and the tires. I don't know. Interesting question. Osborne Curry. I think we'll make this the last one, if I may. Hi, says, I'm having serious thoughts of starting the process to initiate a conversation about having an F1 race in Jamaica. Oh, wonderful. What are the thoughts on having a race there on the calendar? Well, I would only say that a very good friend of mine, David McLaughlin, who owned the Lotus 49 that I was lucky enough to drive around Zandvoort one year, has for many, many, many years tried to have a proper circuit built in the Bahamas and to have a Grand Prix in the Bahamas, if on the back of that. And it's just never happened. The local politics and how money is spent, if there is a lot of money to be spent on Formula One, how that money then is spent by others who want it in other areas, very, very difficult to overcome all those local political dramas. And so David now is doing a great job with young kart racers coming up and helping them, not only from that region, but also over the world. Does a great job for the FIA. But I think he's still based in the Bahamas most of the year, and good luck to him for that. As for Jamaica, wonderful. I just don't think it'll ever happen for the same reason. I think even if somewhere, I mean, how much money would it take to build a circuit and then buy a place on the Grand Prix calendar? You're talking at least $1 billion. And if they had that money, there'd be such an outcry that it was spent on Formula One and not on other things more important to the country. Sadly, it'll never happen. What should happen, however, in my opinion, just to go back to where we were right at the beginning of the show, is that the FIA should have a system, or Liberty should have a system, more importantly, where there is a team under Rob Wilson, a team of experts who go to Jamaica, build a proper kart track, and we have basic karts to enable young Jamaicans, male and female, to race and to do well and to learn the craft, and then to come together and race others from other countries around the world in a sort of grand final, and then to be selected, the top 5 selected by Rob Wilson as to be the 5 in which it would be worth investing money then to get into Formula 4 and upwards and go that way, all different parts of the world, all done under the Rob Wilson system, because there's nobody better. You know, if it wasn't for Rob, Kimi Räikkönen probably would not have won as many Grand Prix as he did. And Rob was the guy that found him. Rob's found so many young drivers and give them opportunities because of their talent in a road car. And Rob can just tell it like that within half a day. And that's what should happen. And I think Liberty should get behind that. In all the countries, they'd love to see represented in Formula One just by a driver. And imagine if there was a Jamaican driver, a true Jamaican driver in Formula One. Imagine what that would do for Formula One. And obviously Jamaica, and certainly that part of the world. You know, it'd be a great thing. You don't need to build circuits and have a Grand Prix. Just do it with a driver. It's much cheaper and much, much more simple. That's my thing anyway. Anyway, there we are. I'm going to have to go now, guys. You know what I got to do now? I've got to do a 2-hour session online video with Jack's teachers through every subject that he's had. Get their assessment of his year. No wonder he's still in bed asleep. I think he wants to have anything to do with that one. Quite rightly so. So I don't think there's anything else I want to say at the moment, other than a big thanks to you for being a part of the show. Thanks so much. Same format this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday videos, plus for members, the live chat during the race. If you haven't yet decided to become a channel member, I would love to have you on board, and there'll be lots of content like that, plus the driver analysis videos that we're starting to do now as well. Not necessarily after every race, but whenever decent photographs that come along from Pirelli, from Spacesuit Media, from others, give me opportunities to look at cars going into corners at the right place. Then we can do some proper analysis of what everybody's doing. So watch out for those as well. Apart from that, see you very soon. Have a great Wednesday. I hope it's not too hot if you're in the summer. If you're in the southern hemisphere, I hope it's not too cold. Hope you're having a great day, great night, great morning. Take care and see you very soon.